This is Emma's Echo, broadcasting from a hidden corner of a world gone quiet. If my voice reaches you, you're one of the last still listening. What I'm about to share is the tale of a survivor, or at least someone who fought to be one. If you're out there, drop a like, leave a comment, let me know you're still holding on. Now let's dive in. I can still picture how that Monday dawned, ordinary as ever. My alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., dragging me out of a dream I can't recall. I rolled out of bed, brewed a pot of coffee, and got ready for another day at Lincoln Heights High. The routine was etched into me, lesson plans tucked under my arm, a pile of essays begging for grades, and the faint dread of a staff meeting I'd rather skip. Nothing hinted at the storm waiting to break. I pulled into the faculty lot with my travel mug steaming and a tote bag slung over my shoulder, the school looming ahead like it always did, a brick fortress buzzing with teenage chaos. The halls were alive when I stepped inside. Kids shuffled past, half asleep, grumbling about algebra homework or rehashing weekend gossip. A few tossed me groggy nods, "Morning, Miss Carter," and I returned them with a tired smile. If I'd known what was coming, I'd have grabbed every kid I saw by the shoulders and screamed at them to run, to get out before the first bell rang. But ignorance is a cruel shield. I made my way to the staff lounge, dodging a sophomore lugging a science project that looked ready to topple. Inside, Mr. Torres, our chemistry teacher, was slumped against the counter. His face was a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chilly room. He clutched a mug like it was anchoring him to the earth, his breath shallow and ragged. "You okay, Javier?" I asked, setting my bag down. He waved a shaky hand, muttering something about a rough night. Maybe the flu. I didn't push. Teachers soldier through colds all the time. I grabbed a stale donut from the box on the table and figured he'd shake it off by lunch. The bell shrilled, and I hustled to room 214, my English classroom. Kids trickled in, dragging their feet. Sophie, a shy junior with a knack for poetry, slipped in last, her hoodie pulled low. She limped faintly as she took her seat, and I frowned. "You need the nurse?" I asked. She shook her head, sinking lower, her voice a mumble I couldn't catch. I let it slide. Teenagers are mysteries half the time. The chatter died down as I started scribbling notes on the Great Gatsby across the whiteboard. Then a shout ripped through the hall. It wasn't the usual "hurry up" bark from a teacher. This was raw, jagged, a cry for help that froze my marker mid-sentence. The kids perked up, eyes darting to the door. "Stay here," I said, my tone sharper than intended. I stepped into the corridor, expecting maybe a scuffle or a kid who'd tripped down the stairs. What I found was a scene already tilting off its axis. The hallway felt wrong. Classroom doors hung ajar. A few lockers gaped open, spilling binders and hoodies onto the tile. I rounded a corner and stopped cold. Ms. Harper, who taught history 2 doors down, knelt beside a crumpled figure. It was Mr. Torres. His skin had gone from gray to ghostly, his chest heaving in uneven gasps. I called his name, no response. Ms. Harper's eyes met mine, wide with panic. He was dizzy, then just dropped, she said, her voice trembling. Blood dotted his sleeve, a smear I hadn't noticed earlier. We didn't have time to guess what was wrong. "We need the nurse," I said, and she nodded. The second bell rang, but the halls didn't clear. Kids lingered, peering from doorways, sensing something off. "Get inside, lock your doors," I snapped, sharper than I meant. Mr. Torres's stillness gnawed at me. Something deeper than a flu was at play. I sprinted to the nurse's station, but the room was dark, a post-it fluttering on the door, back in 10. Useless. I doubled back, heart thudding. Ms. Harper had propped Mr. Torres against the wall. His eyes fluttered, unfocused, like he was clawing his way out of a nightmare. Then a scream, high and wild, tore through the air from down the hall. We locked eyes. Ms. Harper stayed put, hands on Mr. Torres, while I jogged toward the sound. The PA system crackled, and Principal Hayes's voice burst through, strained and urgent. "This is a lockdown. Everyone, stay in your classrooms." Now, my stomach dropped. Lockdowns meant shooters, bombs, real threats. I broke into a run back to my room. Through the door's narrow window, my students' faces pressed against the glass, pale and questioning. I slipped inside, locking it behind me. "Something's happening," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We're staying put." Ethan, a lanky senior, already had his phone out, a news stream glowing on the screen. The anchor's voice was tinny but clear. Reports of violent outbursts across the city, individuals attacking others, biting, authorities urging people to stay indoors. The words sank in slow, like poison. The room went silent, every eye on that flickering feed. Then footsteps, heavy, uneven, thundered past our door. I edged to the window. 2 kids bolted down the hall, chased by a figure moving wrong. Lurching, arms swinging, too fast and too feral. It was gone in a blink, but it was enough. This wasn't a drill. The classroom lock was flimsy, a twist knob that wouldn't hold against a determined shove. "We can't stay here," I said, scanning the room. "We need somewhere safer." The cafeteria or auditorium crossed my mind. Big spaces, sturdy doors, but too exposed. Mia, a quick-witted girl in the front row, piped up, "The tech wing. Those rooms have heavy locks, emergency exits." "Smart." I nodded. "Line up, stay close, no noise." We slipped into the hall, a tight knot of shadows under the buzzing fluorescence. The school felt abandoned already. Papers littered the floor, a backpack slumped against a locker like its owner had vanished mid-step. Faint scratches echoed from behind a locked door, someone hiding, or something worse. We crept toward the tech wing, passing the art room. A crash erupted inside, with splintering, glass shattering. The door flew open, and a kid stumbled out, blood streaking his arm, shallow cuts crisscrossing his skin. He hit the floor, gasping, eyes wild. Behind him, 2 figures emerged, staff, I think, custodians maybe. But their faces were slack, eyes milky, movements jerky like broken puppets. My students pressed in tight. The boy on the ground wheezed, reaching for me. I grabbed a chair leg from the debris, stepping forward as one of the figures lunged. I swung hard, connecting with its shoulder. It staggered but didn't stop, teeth snapping inches from my arm. The second one closed in on the kid. He screamed, a weak, broken sound. "We can't save him," I whispered, hating myself. "Go." I waved the group back, retreating as the figures overtook him. His cries faded as we rounded the corner, a sound I'll never unhear. We hit the tech wing, ducking into the first open lab. The door was thick, the lock solid. We bolted it shut, breath ragged. The room bore scars of a fight. Tables flipped, a cracked monitor flickering. We scavenged what we could, metal stands, a toolbox wrench, anything to swing. A rustle came from a storage nook. I froze, then edged closer, wrench raised. The door creaked open, and Ms. Lyle, the school nurse, tumbled out, pale and shaking. "I hid when it started," she rasped. "They're changing." She'd seen it all morning, students and staff with clammy skin, vacant stares, sudden violence. Some had bites, oozing and raw. "They turn fast," she said, "and they don't stop." The lights flickered, a bulb popping overhead, plunging half the room into gloom. A thud hit the door, slow, deliberate. We held our breath. It stopped, replaced by a faint scrape, then silence. We were safe, for now. But the lab wasn't a fortress. Supplies were thin, phones spotty. Mia suggested the front office landline. It was across the building, a gamble. No choice. We'd move at dawn. The tech lab felt like a cage by the time the first hints of dawn crept through the reinforced windows. We'd spent the night huddled in flickering shadows, the air thick with dread. Ms. Lyle's words about the bitten turning fast looped in my head, a grim metronome to our whispered plans. The thud against the door had faded hours ago, but none of us trusted the silence. Mia's idea to reach the front office landline was our only lifeline. Risky, but better than sitting ducks. We'd move as a group, sticking to the back stairwell behind the tech wing. It led to the second floor, then a straight shot through the media lab to the admin offices. Simple on paper. Nothing was simple anymore. I rallied the crew. Me, Ms. Lyle, Mia, Ethan, and a handful of others who'd kept their nerve. Sophie clutched a metal rod, her limp less noticeable now, fueled by adrenaline or fear. We unbolted the lab door, peering into the hall. The school was a ghost town under the dim emergency lights, lockers ajar, a lone sneaker abandoned mid-stride. A faint groan echoed from somewhere distant, tightening my grip on the wrench. "Stay tight." No sound, I whispered. We slipped out, a ragged line hugging the wall. The stairwell door was unguarded, a small mercy. We climbed, each creak of the steps a gunshot in the stillness. Halfway up, shouts exploded below, sharp, panicked. I risked a glance through the stairwell window. A cluster of kids sprinted toward the main exit, only to scatter as a lurching figure blocked the double doors. Chaos swallowed them as more shadows joined the chase. My chest tightened. We couldn't help. We pressed upward, spilling onto the second floor. The hallway stretched long and dark, littered with signs of flight. Textbooks splayed open, a cracked phone screen glowing faintly. The media lab door was ahead, locked tight. I knocked, soft but urgent. A voice hissed back, "Who's there?" I recognized it. Mr. Grayson, the AV teacher. "It's Ms. Carter," I said. "We're clean." A pause, then the lock clicked. He cracked the door, eyes sunken, clutching a tripod like a spear. "Get in, quick." Inside, the lab was a makeshift bunker. Tables flipped into barricades, a dozen kids and staff crouched low. A girl, Lily, sat apart, her ankle wrapped in a torn shirt, blood seeping through. Ms. Lyle knelt beside her, peeling back the fabric. Bite marks, fresh and ugly. "She got grabbed in the hall," Mr. Grayson muttered. "Pulled free, barely." The news stream had warned of bites spreading this thing, whatever it was. We couldn't risk her turning among us. "She stays separate," I said, hating the coldness in my voice. Ms. Lyle nodded, guiding Lily to a corner behind a bookshelf. Mr. Grayson filled us in. He'd locked down when the screams started, but infected staff had battered the doors earlier. "They're out there, roaming," he said, pointing to scratches on the frame. Our plan held. Get to the office, call for help. But the group was bigger now, harder to move. Ethan suggested strength in numbers. Gather enough to push through, leave the rest here until we signaled safety. Mr. Grayson volunteered, along with 3 kids, Nate, Zoe, and Caleb, armed with scavenge tools. The rest, including Lily, would hold the lab. We stepped back into the hall, a tense knot of 8. The lights buzzed, casting jittery shadows that played tricks on my eyes. Every corner felt alive with threat. We reached the stairwell to the main foyer, peering down. Below, a dozen figures shuffled, some banging on locked classrooms, others drifting aimlessly. One wore a security vest, his radio dangling uselessly. For a second, I hoped he was still human. Then he turned, face slack, eyes clouded. No chance. The office was across that open space. No detours, no hiding. "We go quiet, then fast," I said, signaling descent. Step by step, we edged down, breath held. Halfway, one of the wanderers spotted us. A raspy wheeze escaped its throat, head snapping up. Others turned, alerted. "Run," I hissed. We bolted, feet pounding tile as the group surged toward us, arms clawing air. Mr. Grayson kicked over a trash can, buying seconds. Ms. Lyle hit the office door first, shoving it open. We piled in, me and Nate slamming it shut as hands slapped the glass. The room was a wreck, papers strewn like confetti, a chair toppled, phones dangling off hooks. We shoved a desk against the door as the pounding grew frantic, wood groaning. The landline sat on the counter, a beacon. I snatched it. Dead, no dial tone. Zoe tried her cell, signal faint. 911's busy, she said, voice cracking as she redialed. Nothing. A rustle came from the back. A figure hunched under a desk. Principal Vaughn stumbled out, wild-eyed, clutching a stapler like a weapon. Emma, he croaked, recognizing me. They're everywhere. He'd locked himself in after seeing teachers turn on each other, clawing and biting. He'd tried calling out, district, police, anyone, but got only static or screams. The door rattled harder, cracks spidering the frame. We can't stay, Vaughn said, voice trembling. There's a side exit, faculty lot. Steel door, might still work. It was our shot. He led us through a narrow hall of cubicles, past smeared walls and overturned chairs, hints of a fight long lost. The exit loomed ahead, a heavy slab with an electronic lock. Vaughn swiped his badge. Nothing. Dead. Override, Mislal said, spotting a utility panel. She yanked it open, revealing a tangle of wires and a switch. Could kill the lights too. No options left. She flipped it, sparks popped, and the hall went half dark. The lock beeped green. We pushed through, cold air hitting us like a slap. The faculty lot stretched out, cars abandoned, some with doors gaping, headlights fading. Beyond a chain-link fence, figures roamed between vehicles, slow but relentless. Inside, the office door splintered, shouts and ragged footsteps spilled closer. They'd seen us. Nate and I threw our weight against the exit, forcing it shut as arms reached through. The lock clicked, holding, for now. Outside, the infected in the lot turned, drawn by the noise. We need off campus, Vaughn said, scanning the chaos. Cops, medics, someone's got to be out there. A staff SUV sat near the gate, keys maybe still inside. The fence was padlocked, but Vaughn had a ring of keys. We crept toward it, the infected 30 yards off, closing slow. He fumbled, testing one key, then another. A shout rang out. More figures shambled from an alley, cutting off our retreat. The right key finally turned. The gate swung free. We slipped through, Nate chaining it shut behind us as the infected reached the fence, rattling it. A screech of tires split the air. A car careened around a corner, smashing into a dumpster before roaring off in a cloud of smoke. We ducked low, watching it vanish. The street ahead was a graveyard, silent, shadowed. Sirens wailed faintly, smoke curling skyward downtown. We moved fast, sticking to sidewalks, avoiding the open roads where danger loomed. A side street beckoned, leading to an old rec center a few blocks off. We'd passed abandoned buses, shattered storefronts, bodies slumped in doorways, some still, some stirring. An alley shortcut promised cover. Halfway through, a figure lunged from behind a trash bin, wild-eyed, teeth bared. Mr. Grayson shoved it back with his tripod, and we ran, emerging at the rec center. Its doors were locked, lights glowing inside. Vaughn pounded, shouting our credentials. Teachers from Lincoln Heights, let us in. A voice barked, go away. We pleaded, survivors, not infected. The door cracked, a volunteer peering out. He knew Vaughn from a school event, waved us in. We bolted inside, securing the entrance. The lobby held a dozen locals, scared, scattered, clutching bags and bats. The volunteer said they'd barred the doors when rumors of attacks hit. It's bad out there, he muttered. Mislal offered to check the wounded. Cuts and bruises, no bites yet. The rec center was big, unfortified. We'd need barricades. Tables and chairs became walls at the front. As we worked, a frantic banging erupted outside. New survivors, begging entry. We hesitated, then opened up. One collapsed inside, arm gashed, bite marks weeping red. Mislal stepped in, but Vaughn pulled me aside. We can't risk it spreading here, he whispered. A murmur rippled through the group, mercy or safety. We settled on a side room for the bitten, watched close. The lights flickered, dimmed, steadied. Outside, Crashes grew louder. Something was coming. The rec center lobby was a fragile bubble of calm when we locked ourselves in, but it didn't last. The handful of locals, shopkeepers, parents, a janitor clutching a crowbar, stared at us with a mix of hope and suspicion as we piled furniture against the front doors. Mislal tended to the wounded in a side room, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. The guy we'd let in, the one with the bite, lay groaning on a cot, separated from the rest. Vaughn's warning about the risk he posed hung heavy, a shadow none of us could shake. The air buzzed with murmured questions. What's happening? How long can we hold out? But answers were as scarce as the light filtering through the boarded windows. The volunteer who'd let us in, a wiry guy named Paul with a rec center polo stretched tight over his shoulders, gave us the rundown. Locked up tight when the crazies started roaming, he said, rubbing his neck. Heard it on the radio. People biting people, streets turning into war zones. He'd seen a cop car scream past an hour ago, sirens fading into the distance, no sign of rescue since. Our arrival stirred the group. Some saw Vaughn's principal badge as a lifeline. Others just saw more mouths to feed. We didn't have a plan beyond staying alive, but the rec center offered space. A gym, a kitchen, a back exit if it came to that. We'd make it work. I grabbed Ethan and Zoe, hauling desks to reinforce the entrance. The new survivors pitched in, dragging chairs and a busted vending machine to the pile. Paul suggested checking the back, a narrow lot fenced off from the alley. We found the rear door solid but untested, so we stacked crates against it, a flimsy shield. As we finished, a sharp hammering erupted at the front. Shadows pressed against the glass. More survivors, faces smeared with dirt, shouting to be let in. They don't look bitten, Mia said, peering through a crack. We unbolted the door, and they stumbled inside. 5 of them, breathless, one clutching a toddler. But the last one collapsed mid-step, shirt torn, a bite oozing on his calf. Mislal rushed over, but the room tensed. Side room, Vaughn barked, voice low. We watch him. The healthy newcomers nodded, shaken. No one argued mercy over caution now. Paul locked the door again, and the lobby settled into an uneasy hum. Cell signals were ghosts. Ethan's phone caught a bar, then lost it. The TV in the corner spat emergency alerts on loop. Stay indoors. Avoid contact. Await further instruction. Further instruction never came. Smoke curled outside, black tendrils snaking past the windows from fires we couldn't see. Then the lights flickered, a stutter, a dip, back on. Everyone froze, waiting for the dark to claim us. Paul broke the silence, jogging back from the front desk, face drained. Cameras, he stammered. They're coming, dozens of them. He'd checked the grainy security feed, lurching figures converging on the rec center from every angle, drawn by noise or instinct. The lobby erupted, shouts, sobs, a kid's wail cut short by a mother's hand. 2 teams, I said, raising my voice over the din. One holds the front, one secures the back. Vaughn nodded, splitting the group. Ethan and Zoe joined me at the lobby doors, piling more junk, tables, a busted couch, against the glass. Paul led Nate and Caleb to the rear, slamming cabinets into place. The first thud hit the back door, a dull boom that shook the walls. Then the front glass rattled, fists, shoulders, something heavier smashing against it. The lights blinked again, longer this time, and died. Darkness swallowed us, broken only by phone flashlights slicing through the black. Circuit breaker, Paul yelled, darting off with a couple locals. Emergency lights flickered on, weak and yellow, casting long shadows that danced with every crash outside. The toddler whimpered, buried in her mom's arms. I gripped my wrench, scanning the barricade as it jolted under the onslaught. A shattering scream tore through the air, not from us, but the building itself. Glass exploded somewhere down the east hall, a window giving way. They're in, Zoe shouted, voice cracking. We grabbed what we could. Me with my wrench, Vaughn snagging a chair leg, Ethan hefting a broom handle, and ran toward the sound. In a dim corridor off the lobby, shards glittered on the tile. 3 figures clawed through the broken pane, skin torn, eyes vacant. More pressed behind them, a tide of mindless hunger. We formed a line, a pitiful wall of flesh and scavenged steel. They lunged, arms swiping, teeth snapping. I swung, cracking a skull. Bone gave with a sick thud, but it barely slowed. Ethan jabbed his broom, keeping another at bay. Vaughn roared, slamming his chair leg into a shoulder. Mislal herded the non-fighters back. Kids, the mom, anyone too shaken to swing. The infected didn't flinch, didn't tire, just pressed forward over their own fallen. We can't hold. Nate yelled from behind, where more thuds echoed. They were breaching the rear too. Fall back, I shouted. We retreated, step by bloody step, the corridor narrowing our world to a tunnel of terror. The lobby was a lost cause. Screams from the side room meant the bitten were turning too. Our only shot was up. A stairwell loomed to the right, leading to the second floor, storage, offices, a slim chance. Upstairs, I called, waving the group toward it. We ran, hauling the slowest with us. Paul was last, dragging a woman who'd frozen mid-step. I reached back for a man calling out. A dad, maybe, clutching a photo frame. Too late. Hands yanked him down, teeth sinking in as we hit the stairs. His scream followed us up. The second floor was a tight hall. 2 rooms, a closet, a faint glow from a high window. We crammed into a conference room overlooking the gym, bolting the door. Desks and shelves became our barricade, shoved against the frame with shaking hands. Below, through interior glass, the gym sprawled dark and eerie, infected staggering across the court like lost players in a twisted game. The toddler clung to her mom, silent now. Vaughn slumped against a wall, chest heaving. Mislal checked the group. Scrapes, bruises, no bites. We'd lost 3 downstairs, maybe more. The door rattled, fingers prying at the edges, the barricade shifting. Roof, Mr. Grayson rasped, pointing to the closet. Saw a hatch. I bolted over, finding a rusty ladder bolted to the wall. I climbed, shoving the hatch open. Cold night air rushed in, laced with distant sirens and the hum of rotors overhead. The rooftop stretched flat and empty, a concrete island in a sea of chaos. We hoisted everyone up, kids first, then the rest. Zoe pulled the hatch shut as the conference door buckled below, a chorus of groans flooding the room we'd fled. Up top, the city sprawled in ruin. Flames licked the skyline, smoke choking the stars. Helicopters buzzed, spotlights skimming blocks away, never lingering. Abandoned cars dotted the streets, headlights fading like dying eyes. The infected had found the fire escape. Metal clanged below, but they didn't climb far. We were safe, for a breath. Vaughn paced, muttering about waiting for dawn, banking on National Guard sweeps. Zoe argued we move, find an evacuation route. The view said neither was a sure bet. Streets teemed with danger, help a ghost. Hours crawled by. We rotated watch, eyes burning, nerves raw. The moon rose, cold and indifferent, as choppers faded into silence. No spotlight touched us. Dawn broke slow, painting the city in ash and gold. Fires smoldered, streets choked with wrecks. We split again. Vaughn's team would head for a rumored police line, risking the fire escape. Mine, me, Ms. Lyle, Ethan, Zoe, would scout the outskirts for shelter. We ripped a tarp from a rooftop vent, scrawled help in marker, and tied it to the edge, a prayer to the sky. Vaughn's group descended, vanishing into an alley. We watched, breathless, then turned to our own path, a service ladder to a quieter street below. Dawn bled across the rooftop of the rec center, a smear of gray and orange over a city chewed apart. We'd watched Vaughn's team slip down the fire escape hours ago, disappearing into the alleys like ghosts swallowed by smoke. The rest of us, me, Ms. Lyle, Ethan, Zoe, and a handful of others, stood on the edge, staring at the tarp flapping with its desperate help. No choppers lingered, no spotlights swept our way. The streets below churned with danger, but staying put wasn't an option. The infected rattled the fire escape every so often, a reminder we were one slip from being overrun. We had to move. The service ladder on the far side beckoned, a rickety spine of metal dropping to a narrow street that looked less choked with chaos. Outskirts, I said, voice rough from a sleepless night. Somewhere quieter, maybe a shelter. Ms. Lyle nodded, her nurse's calm fraying at the edges. Ethan and Zoe hefted their scavenged weapons, a pipe, a shard of wood, grim determination in their eyes. We climbed down one by one, hands slick on the rungs, every creak a heartbeat louder than the last. The alley below was a graveyard of trash, crumpled cans, a tipped bike, but no shambling figures. A small win. We hit the pavement, clustering tight, senses razor sharp. The city unfurled around us, a tapestry of ruin. Smoke hung thick, stinging our lungs, drifting from fires that flickered like distant stars. Cars sat abandoned, some crumpled into each other, others with doors flung wide as if their drivers had bolted mid-breath. A delivery truck leaned against a hydrant, its windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Sirens wailed somewhere far off, a fading chorus swallowed by the morning haze. We stuck to the shadows, ducking behind wrecks, every step a gamble against the unknown. The first block was quiet, too quiet. A bodega's neon flickered faintly, its door smashed in, shelves gutted. A figure slumped against a wall, still, maybe dead. We didn't check. Zoe whispered about a clinic she knew, a mile west, near the edge of town. Might have supplies, people, she said. It was a thread to tug, better than wandering blind. We veered down a side street, weaving through debris, shattered glass, a kid's backpack spilling pencils onto the asphalt. The silence pressed in, heavy and wrong, until a shuffle snapped it. From behind a dumpster, a shape lurched, wild-haired, eyes milky, hands clawing air. Ethan swung his pipe, cracking its knee. It stumbled but kept coming, a guttural snarl tearing from its throat. Ms. Lyle yanked me back as Zoe drove her wood shard into its chest. It dropped, twitching, and we ran, breaths jagged. More rustles echoed nearby, too close. We darted into another alley, emerging onto a stretch of road lined with shuttered shops. The clinic wasn't far, but the streets were waking up, alive with threats we couldn't see. Halfway there, we spotted it. A low brick building, windows dark, a faded urgent care sign dangling by one bolt. The front was locked tight, glass intact but smudged with grime. Around back, I said, leading us through a weed-choked lot. The rear door hung ajar, a sliver of shadow inside. We slipped in, weapons raised, into a waiting room turned war zone. Chairs toppled, a reception desk splintered, papers blanketing the floor like snow. A faint moan drifted from deeper in. "Check it," Ms. Lyle whispered, nodding toward a hall. I crept forward with Ethan, past a flickering exit sign. In an exam room, a woman lay curled on a cot, alive, barely, her arm wrapped in bloody gauze. She stirred, eyes fluttering. "Help," she croaked, voice a thread. Ms. Lyle rushed in, checking her pulse. "She's not bitten," she said, relief cracking through. The woman, Clara, she mumbled, had fled her apartment when neighbors turned, holed up here with a slashed arm from broken glass. She'd seen military trucks rolling north at dusk, maybe a barricade. It was a crumb of hope. We scavenged what we could: bandages, a half-empty water jug, a flashlight with dying batteries. Clara couldn't walk far, so we propped her between Ethan and Zoe, her weight slowing us. The clinic wasn't safe, too open, too close to main roads. Community college, Clara rasped. 2 blocks. Big doors, high fences. It sounded defensible, a step up from this exposed shell. We moved out, sticking to back streets, every rustle spiking our pulse. A crashed sedan blocked one path, its driver gone, or worse, lurking. We skirted it, eyes darting. The college loomed ahead, a squat campus of concrete and steel, its gates chained but climbable. We boosted Clara over, then scrambled up, dropping into a courtyard strewn with abandoned bags and bikes. The main building's doors were locked, but a side entrance gave with a shove. Inside, the halls were dim, power long dead, but intact, no blood, no bodies. A lecture hall offered space, rows of seats, a projector dangling from the ceiling. We barricaded the door with podiums, catching our breath in the gloom. Clara slumped against a wall, sipping water Ms. Lyle rationed out. "Military's coming," she insisted, clinging to her glimpse of trucks. We wanted to believe her, but the silence outside mocked us. Ethan climbed a stairwell to a window, peering out. "Nothing moving," he reported. "Just empty." Zoe paced, restless. "We can't wait forever. If they're not here by noon, we scout again." Ms. Lyle stayed quiet, tending Clara, her hands steady but her face etched with doubt. I nodded. Waiting felt like surrender, but rushing blind could kill us faster. Hours ticked by, marked only by the shifting light through high windows. We rotated watch, ears straining for engines, boots, anything human. Once, a distant rumble stirred us, a plane, maybe, too high to see, but it faded. The infected hadn't found us yet, a fluke we didn't trust to hold. Noon came and went, no trucks, no rescue. "We move," I said finally, breaking the stalemate. "North, toward where Clara saw them. Slow, careful." The group agreed, grim but resolute, gathering our pitiful haul, water, bandages, weapons. We slipped out the side door, back into the courtyard, then over the fence again. The street stretched north, a gauntlet of wreckage and risk. A pharmacy sat gutted across the road, its sign swinging in the breeze. Beyond, a park sprawled, open, exposed, but a shortcut. We took it, dodging between trees, shadows stretching long as the sun climbed. A figure shambled near a bench too far to chase us, too close for comfort. We pressed on, reaching a residential strip, houses dark, lawns overgrown, a dog crate toppled in a driveway. Half a mile in, tires screeched, real this time. A Humvee roared around a corner, olive drab against the gray, soldiers piling out. "Down," one yelled, rifles up. We dropped, hands raised, shouting we were clean. They swept us with flashlights, eyes hard but human. "Quarantine zone, 3 miles north," a sergeant barked. "Move, now more coming." Behind him, groans rose, dozens of infected spilling from a side street, drawn by the engine. The soldiers opened fire, buying us time. We ran, Clara hobbling between us, toward the promise of safety. The zone emerged past a bridge, barricades, tents, floodlights cutting the dusk. Medics waved us in, scanning for bites, shoving us into a cordoned area. Faces stared survivors, hollowed out, some bandaged, some just lost. Soldiers barked orders, radios crackling about containment, evacuation. We'd made it, but the city burned beyond the wire, a reminder of how thin the line was. 12 hours ago, I'd been grading papers. Now, I stood on cracked earth, kids I'd taught looking to me for what came next. That's where it ends, not victory, not collapse, but a stubborn grip on tomorrow. The worst might still be ahead, but we're here, step by shaky step, chasing a flicker of something worth saving. If you're listening, don't let the signal die. Like, comment, subscribe, keep the voices alive. In a world this broken, silence is the real killer.